Welcome to the podcast that is designed to fuel your success in selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Everybody, welcome back to the final track on this episode. We are talking about what everybody wants to hear about, of course, AI. More specifically, we are wrapping up the track titled, Is AI Better Than a Human Being for Quality in the Contact Center, amongst the contact center agents? Nobody better than our farthest reaching guest ever on the podcast, Mr. Giles Potter from Great Outcomes, coming to us from New Zealand. Welcome on, my man.
Thanks very much, Josh. It's great to be here, coming in from Auckland today.
Love it. Thursday here, Friday there. It's always going to get me. I think I bring that up every time we talk.
Absolutely.
Giles, so we know that you've got a lot of expertise in contact center. We could narrow this down into a lot of different things, and we're going to get to some good content here in just a second about AI and CX and all of that. I always like to start off with, how did you start out? Have you always been in contact center? Have you always been in tech? Did you wash dishes and say, I want to get into technology? Where did it start? How'd you get here?
Oh, no, I wasn't in tech at all. Not at all. I actually started in marketing as a young man in my early 20s. I wanted to be a marketing manager, and one of my early jobs was every boy's dream, working in a car manufacturer, marketing finance agreements at car dealerships. So we used to go off and do exciting things in the weekend, like supporting the dealer racing teams at exciting racetracks around the country. So, yeah, that was really fun. But it ultimately led to technology.
So how do you get the and I'm a car guy, so I mean, part of me wants to hear more about cars, but how do you make the transition from the marketing world to firing up Great Outcomes, right, and doing what you've done to build the business up?
Yeah, actually looking back, it was a pretty natural line, but it went from marketing car finance agreements to then saying, so hold it, there's a whole lot of customer service in marketing and operations and fulfillment. If you're going to sell lots of car finance, you're going to actually service them as well. So, hey, you go and look after that big customer service operation as well as at the beginning. So, at a point in my career, I swapped across to working for a finance company as part of a bank. And they said to me, oh, and by the way, look after the contact center as well, will you? And that was the first time I failed in life where I'm like, oh my God, this is much harder than I thought. And I met failure flat in the face.
I love it. I love it. Now, how do you if we flash back a little bit here, right? Failure hits you in the face. Where does the inspiration in that come from, right? Is it lessons learned, and you go, oh my gosh, I could do this, I could make it better? How do you get into the space?
Well, look, it's one of those situations where as a young man or a young woman, you're faced with that situation of like, of course we can do this. We can get in and, we can lead customer service. We can have really wow customers and that. But actually, the contact center environment's a really challenging thing between, we need lots and lots of people to interact with the customers. But that's obviously really expensive as well. So you get this challenge between the two. And that's what I meant by failure. It was like, oh my God, this is much harder than we realized. And after 3 years of really trying my hardest with our teams and people doing great things, um, I actually had a natural break from the career world and corporate to actually think like, where am I going to go? What am I actually going to do with this? And that's when I thought, look, I really want to get out there and help others with their contact centers. And so we set up Great Outcomes way back in 2001. And maybe there's a little bit of self-realization in there that the things that we find hardest in life, things that we actually fail with, those are the ones we don't want to let go of. And so I actually grabbed hold of that. And, the next 20 years was just all about contact center. And we started with initially just project after project, helping clients with anything at all that they needed to do to fix their contact centers. And that's been the underlying sort of approach and value that we've always brought to assist our clients is, look, we're here to help you just make much better customer interactions.
Love it. Let's talk about CX. Okay, customer experience. How do you feel that there's CX across the entire organization, and then there's the customer experience within the contact center. How do those two differ? I guess what's different between the two?
Yeah, it's a great place to focus in on because contact centers had traditionally been a island on their own, struggling with their technology, struggling with customer satisfaction, struggling with people management around staff wellness and staff motivation. And a lot of others in the organization looked in on them from the outside and said, "Oh my God, that looks difficult. I wouldn't want to go and work in that part of the company." So they became an island, and that was a really unhealthy situation. Technology, thankfully, has brought contact centers back into mainstream part of the organization. And now we can really actually look at the customer experience, CX, being something that is right across the organization because through data, we're actually able to share the customer interaction. So it doesn't matter what part of the organization you're in now, through integration with things like CRM, the actual contact center platform itself, whether someone's interacted with you by email, by voice, by web chat, uh, anyone in the organization can actually see that and see that in real time as soon as that's actually happened. And so that's of huge value to people like sales, logistics, pricing, accounts. And go, ah, I see that person's actually just returned those boots. They've actually just got that ticket ID and that email's just gone out to them. Oh, so I'm actually talking to them about their late payment for those boots. Well, no wonder because they've actually just returned them to us. So that suddenly brings CX out to all of the organization, and that's been a huge improvement for all sectors.
Yeah, great point too. And I remember sitting on that island. When I got out of similar tracks, right? Auto industry, and my path is a little more weird and less guided, but and full of mistakes. But the one thing that I remember in that call center, right, doing dial up tech support, was that you can kind of hide. And not that it's an easy job, but from a QA perspective, and I know we're going to get into QA here in a second, it was just about, well, I got to be on my best call when this manager comes around because that's going to be my score, and he's going to YJack and listen and all those things. And yeah, to your point, it's just so different, right? I love you. You call out a great point, right? Not sitting on an island. I think that's super important to call out.
Yeah, yeah, thanks.
Um, let's talk about social media. So obviously, a lot of the contact centers grew up, voice space, right? Other things evolved. Let's talk about that. What from you've seen this in the last 20 years. What's your opinion here? Let's talk about impact of all social media channels rather than just voice and email on the entire customer experience. And what have you seen in that as you've talked to all these different customers?
Yeah, so it's very sector specific to start with. So I wanted to start by talking about healthcare to begin with, because when you talk to the healthcare sector, I mean that's obviously a massive sector too. So it's a really, really important for all of us. Um, so healthcare initially just couldn't imagine interacting with their patients, as they call them, not customers, but their patients, over social media. So they're going like, "You, what? You're going to have one of my clinical staff talking to a patient over Facebook Messenger? I don't think so." So but then when you actually start to break it down, you start to say to them, well, look, actually, your receptionists get really tied up trying to book appointments, and we're being told that we can't book in for 8 weeks. So actually, what about we actually start using some smarts to actually facilitate some of that? So break it down to, yeah, I'm not actually talking to a nurse. I'm actually starting by just talking to a receptionist. So let's actually use the channels. So whether it be social media, and it really doesn't matter. It's how the customer actually wants to talk to you. If they want to actually start off that interaction through through WhatsApp, then let's just be ready to do that. We might actually migrate them across to email, but we don't necessarily need to. We might be able to actually capture a whole lot of that information that we need through WhatsApp to begin with. And then the penny drops. They start to go like, "You mean I'm not going to tie up all my staff all the time with this?" And it's like, "Yeah. So let's actually look at how we could do this for you." And you're then away, and that really opens up some great conversations to get started.
So I'm gonna you brought up something I want to call out here, right? Pro tip for partners moment. So our partners listen to this, right? And I think what a lot of people are saying to themselves is, okay, maybe I'm not in CX and maybe I'm not in AI and I don't understand that world and I didn't grow up in it. Maybe I grew up over here in security or in SD-WAN or in cloud or wherever, somewhere different or adjacent. If you take back in the 20 years that you saw this, right? Obviously, technology has changed. My next question is going to be about AI specifically. But if you look at where it's started in '01 and where it's come in the last 20 years, I like to give away, probing questions to partners, thing to help them do discovery calls. And so I'm curious to knock some of this maybe preconceived notion out. Did the customers that you talked to over those 20 years, what percentage of them knew that they had what they needed or knew that there was even a problem versus you saying, have you thought about it this way?
Oh, look, uh, it's a small percentage. Like if perhaps for every one person that comes and talks to us and says, "I just want this," there's about four or five who are coming to us and going like, "Oh my God, I've got these headaches. I just, we haven't got enough staff, or we took on this technology and it's been a nightmare, or we're going through a merger and we're going to be twice the size that we were, and I just can't imagine how we're going to deal with all their customer experience problems and all ours as well. We can't even get on top of our own." So those are most of the time, I think you've actually got to, first of all, just really be prepared to listen. You sort of a bit of the just come and talk to me and I will just hear what your problems are to begin with. You just let it all out. And that's a really great place because you cannot solve it all in one go, but you can start with something small to begin with. Just a first question. And so that's how I've found that we can actually help people who think that maybe technology couldn't help them. Sometimes, you may think that you're actually talking to someone who just doesn't want to hear about technology, that you're just trying to sell a box. And it's not that at all. It's hey, you send a lot of SMSs out to your customers. Had you ever thought of actually what it might be like if they actually were able to reply to you? Because you just send these one-way SMSs. Like that must be very frustrating for them if what you've sent doesn't make sense. So what about we actually just have a look at that with two-way SMS? So then they go, hey, wouldn't that be useful? Yeah. So we haven't actually solved all the contact center problems at all. We've actually just started with one really quite simple little aspect. And without even really trying, you might have actually just sold them a product because they might go, yeah, well, let's kick out our current SMS product, which doesn't actually help us that much. And let's look at one that can. So that's a first step.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, just in that, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think that's beautiful. It's a great call out, right? Because I think people have a lot of conceived notions of it. This has got to be incredibly difficult to start. I can't imagine where I start. What do I even say? What do I even do? Because I imagine that people already kind of know what they want. And I think you called out a great point. 4 out of 5 don't know, and they need the therapy. It sounded to me like you were describing therapy a little bit, which is okay because we have to listen, we have to help, and then we have to prescribe whatever it is. So I love it. It's a great example.
Yeah. Yeah. So, start with that question of like, how do you speak to your customers? It may not even be voice. How do you contact? How do you communicate with your customers? Someone said that at one of the conferences I've been to, and I thought that was the best opening line I ever heard.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, let's talk about AI. Let's get in here and say, first of all, for you, right, as you saw this evolution, what was your first run in with AI from a contact center perspective?
First run in. Wow. I actually had started to hear about it more from the bigger sectors. So you start hearing that AI, is coming just in general. It wasn't even as specific as contact center. And so I actually was at Partner Summit in Denver, and I got a chance to hear the amazing Sam Nelson. She was working at that time for leading the AI dev team for a provider. And I went there and I was just wowed. I just like, oh my God, she's opened up this whole world. I'm hearing from someone who actually, is in the midst of it. And then getting back to work after being at that Denver conference, I started talking to people about like, I've just heard the future. This is incredible. So then when we actually started to experience it, and this is a thing I feel is important that people should understand is I'm not seeing AI as it's all about AI and there's the other environment that is no AI. I'm actually seeing this convergence of, well, we've got some AI going on here, and then we've got the rest of our interactions which are not AI based, but it's just a melding. So I'd like to encourage people to think about AI as something that we can do some work where we've got some AI coming into our CX processes, and gradually that might grow. But we have started really small, and it could be as small as the first full interaction I had was actually in insurance. I have a motor scooter. I get around because in the city it's easy to get on the motor scooter rather than try and take the big four-wheel drive into an appointment. And so I buzzed in there on my motor scooter and I sold one. I bought another motor scooter and I've got this new one, and I had to change out the insurance policy. So I got in touch with my insurer and said like, can you end that one and start me a new one? And it was all done over Facebook Messenger. And there were lots of questions at the beginning, really simple stuff. Give us your rego number. Can you just tell us the policy number if you know it? If you don't, just give us your date of birth, your name, address. So when you look back at that, you go, like, hey, I thought AI was going to be like, sci-fi. But actually, no, no. Hey, look, they're just imagine how many agent hours they saved by gathering as much of that information as they could in the changeover of my insurance policies. And the only time that a person got involved was at the very end when they came on and said, thanks for all that information. I've now changed your policy over, and that's now all in place for your new motor scooter. There you go. So it wasn't a case of all AI or no AI. It was this convergence of the two. And so that was the first time. And we're now looking at some much smarter things with that insurer. I'm very loyal to my clients. I get my insurance through my own clients. But, talking to them about, AI at a deeper level. But that's a good
Yeah.
place to start.
I like that because it calls out the point not of there's the fear in the market of AI is going to replace jobs and blah 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 blah, but I think what you called out is you called out a great use case of it's not that AI is going to replace the jobs. I look at that and I hear yes, it's a more efficient use of the agent's time. And if the companies are able to manage their budgets better and more efficiently use the time and augment with AI where it makes sense, then how many more companies is gonna allow to grow on a thinner budget, right? Maybe grow faster, maybe take off, maybe start up faster, all kinds of things. I think all kinds of good that comes from that. You call it a really good point there.
Thank you.
So let's talk about quality management, quality assurance in the contact center. So we talked about kind of your first run in there and exposure to AI. If you look at kind of where some of these things are now, and if people have listened to the last episode, they're going to have heard from Level AI and some of the quality tools that are out there and mind blowing ability to do some of these things. What's your perspective on AI if we isolate it to quality management, quality assurance in the contact center, of how to utilize that best?
Yeah. I think the first impressions that some people have about it is that we should be using AI to notify a supervisor of a poor interaction. Someone's just complained, etc. But actually, it's way more than that. And we actually got to move away from that. We could actually now think, yeah, well, that was maybe in the past. That's the sort of thing that we used quality management to automate and get notifications. But now we need to actually be thinking in the QM and quality assurance space around um, value development, I think. So in terms of value, I mean, an organization should be thinking about how do we use QM to increase the value from, say, the high value groups, our high value customers. So if you've got in sectors like high purchase value sectors such as, say, travel, financial advice, maybe new vehicle sales, going back to our interest in
Yeah.
cars. Um, you've got customers that you're dealing with that are very high value to the organization um, and others that are mid or lower value to the organization. So let's use AI to start seeing how we can increase value to the organization through QM. So that means things like um, more of a program of work around how would we support agents to deepen the relationship with a high value customer. So QM is typically looking at we're in the interaction, whether it be email, whether it be chat, voice, doesn't matter. We're in the interaction, and what could we be doing to improve that interaction in real time? So QM's not always about retrospectively looking back at what's happening. It's like, let's actually try and see how we can help the agent with improving that relationship. And so I'm thinking about things like um, how's the customer, how's the agent approaching this customer? Are they um, using open-ended questions, for instance? Um, have they actually approached the qualification of their customer well? Now, so this is moving away to looking at a sales development, like sales interaction, as opposed to what typically in the past QM was just looking at customer service. Did we build rapport properly? Have they covered all the things they needed? Use the person's name 3 times in the interaction? Did they close the interaction well? Summarize in the notes, but not at all. If we're actually a bit smart about it, we can actually really develop value for the organization that starts to pay for things, and we start to get more support at senior exec level. And the last part of that interaction is something to talk about, which is also where I feel it's really at the moment, is at the end of the interaction. AI can do a brilliant job for us through things like transcriptions and summarizing the interaction. And so when we're talking to our customers, as in chief operating officers, GMs, directors, the sort of people that our audience here, these are the people they're talking to. Think about your people are spending a lot of time at the end of an interaction, like summarizing it or taking notes. How many hours? What percentage of your time? Now, I heard someone say the other day something like 18% of time in the contact center is spent at the end of the interaction. Will you imagine how many hours that is? So there is value capture for organizations. If we just drop that 18% of time spent at the end of interactions to, let's say, 12% of time, and we get back 6% points because we use AI to summarize the interaction, you're talking about millions of dollars. So there you go. It's an easy one to start that
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I can quantify that exactly. Every call that we finished, I got to go into up to 15 minutes of ramp up time, and I was never negatively dinged for not getting. And you're right, it was just about getting the notes in on the account, setting the status, setting the flags, and done. But a lot of it was okay. I got to take these notes, put this here. They said this, we did that thing. So if tier 2 gets it or tier 3 gets it, all of those types of things. So yeah, absolutely. I've loved. It's so cool to see just what transcription has been able to call out. So really good points there.
Yeah.
So all right, now we're going to talk about a deal. So I want to go back to you've seen a lot of deals. I want to get into probably my favorite part about this is sometimes deals don't finish the way that they started, right? And I think you brought up that you elicited that 1 in 5 know what they want and it finishes the way that they want. So maybe walk us through an example, a deal that you went through, a customer situation, and really how did it start? What'd you learn? What kind of technology and kind of some of the nuances of the deal did they have, and what type of tech did you put in place, and really what did it solve?
Yeah.
Walk us through that journey.
Um, yeah. So two deals coming to mind. They're both very similar. And so the first thing I just want to say to people who may be thinking about how do you approach this, and is that in the contact center deal, typically, if they're coming to you and they want a contact center, whether it's through a tender, an RFP, or something sort of formal, or even just it's an open brief and they've come to talk to you about it. Um, they often are the quite standard things are being looked for. Tell us about the user licenses, tell us about agent login, security, tell us about functionality. We want to set up queues, we want to have reporting. We need to make sure that supervisors get full view of the dashboards, but you don't often find them coming in and saying to you, oh, and when we get down to using AI to save some of our payroll, maybe replace some of our agent time with AI. Um, don't get many inquiries leading in with that. So that's a sort of something that might develop. And so a couple of actual deals that have happened quite quickly. One of them actually was just a very short sales cycle and contact center terms, about 90 days from first inquiry to actually signed contract. They were just looking to replace their problematic solution with a new one, and we gave them all the functionality. But now that that's in and live and it's up and going, and they're very happy with having replaced that, they're starting to say, but strategically, the organization still needs to do X, Y, Z. And that's where AI starts to come in my experience. So we don't actually really lead in with it. That's where that value adding comes, where we go back in after the solution's there and we start saying, hey, had you thought about doing this? Or I know you want more strategic improvements from the technology. You're trying to show your board that you're getting value, your senior exec team, that, all this investment and time we've got there. Yeah, well, let's actually start talking about that. And you almost like go back in with a whole another sales cycle, but that's value. We're not talking about actually just meeting your sales targets. We're actually talking about your client going, hey, I'm so glad we've got these guys in. They actually, I mean, look at all this value these guys can actually bring to us because now they're telling us about how to actually use this great platform we've got, and we're going to do all this more extra stuff. And there may be second, third, and fourth products that you actually need to bring in to actually meet everything. May not even necessarily come out of that initial platform because it's not about selling boxes. It's about selling value to the client. You're wanting better CX. We'll do that however we can.
Love it. Final couple questions here. So we talked a little bit about this, and we talked about what customers or potential customers think they need versus what they ultimately need. Uh, how do you help talk through that, right? What are some of the challenges that you go in super excited, I can come in and help, and the customers maybe just don't think they need help there, or they don't see how this is going to be of value to them, or they can't equate the cost to it? How do you, for any partners listening, how do you kind of push through that and really help make sure that the customer sees the value that maybe they're not seeing initially?
Yeah. Yeah, well, look, that is a tough one too, though. No easy answers there. Well, some things that come to mind are, first of all, we don't sell to just one person in the organization. Replacing a contact center is a huge thing for an organization. Their main form of interaction with their customer base, you are taking that away from them and replacing it with another one. So that's going to impact on quite a number of people in the organization. Um, so first thing is just good practice is start off by making sure that you've got at least three or four senior key people that you're actually talking to in that organization because they've all got to buy into this. If you want to have a fairly quick sale, you're not going to allow this to drag out over a long period of time. Um, you make the effort to actually get to speak to a number of people, and that may not be easy because your first stakeholder may not be that keen on you getting out there to talk to the second, third, and fourth person. But that's critical. You've got to understand what they're all going to get out of this and why they all want this to actually occur and happen. Um, and if you've got a difficult first stakeholder who's, say, not that convinced, you're not really showing me something great, but you suspect that there is actually a deal there, it may be that the second, third, and fourth person that you speak to can actually provide something that the first person hasn't revealed. And quite often it's things like, hey, you never told me that your contract is coming up in April 2024. We're pretty close. Do, were you planning to replace the system, or just sort of wanting to talk about functionality? It's like that's a different, so you suddenly change the game plan then. It's like you've got time against you now. That's a short change out cycle to get ready for. And so if that came from the second person, say, you can go back to that first difficult person and say, so we're changing the approach. We're now talking about it on a time frame basis as opposed to a functionality basis. So that's how I try and approach those where they're just not appearing to be that convinced
Awesome.
in meeting you.
Yeah, good advice. I like it. Final thoughts here as we look out ominously here to the future. I mean, we this year we've seen true birth of OpenAI and ChatGPT and all these things. So, from a future perspective, and I know this evolves very fast, especially this pace in this industry. But if you look out 12 plus months, 18 months, anything that, in Giles' humble opinion that you see that's going to happen that's differently, new evolutions to look for, things to be aware of, things to be, setting expectations of, hey, customer, if you're thinking about this in the next 12 months, let's keep this on the horizon. Anything different, or just double down on everything that we just said?
No, it's definitely it's a very fast pace of change. And the thing I see that's changing is the improving of CX that the customers' expectations are increasing around what they expect your client's organization should be able to do for them. It's that initially they wanted to call, they wanted to get through, and now people are not necessarily expecting that so much because they go, well, if I can't get through calling, I'm just going to I should be able to get information from you online. I should be able to chat or WhatsApp you, or, I should get a automated information back. And so we've seen the bar raise really high. That's been a big leap. It's not just I want to call and get through. It's I want information. I'm just going to check with the store. Are they open? I'm just going to check if they've got those shoes in stock. I need to get another pair. And it's the now. I need that. I expect that. And that's putting a lot of clients under massive pressure because they're being asked from all angles for information. And that's really pushed the CX bar up. And within their organizations, likewise, the rest of the organization wants to be in on that. The salespeople are saying, like, hey, I'm going out to the sales call. I looked up on my phone on CRM, and I couldn't see any information about that person who just actually got in touch with you this morning. And I just walked into a sales meeting. So, like, hey, what's happening here? I should have known that. So they're getting it from both ends, and it's no longer really about voice calls. Yeah, we've got to just think about interactions.
It's a great point. The bar is set high, and everybody's got to catch up. So good stuff. Giles, man, that wraps us up. I'm questioned out, man. You covered some great stuff. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, it's a real honor to be here, Josh, and thank you for inviting me in today. I just really enjoyed it. It's always fun to talk to you.
Love it. All right, everybody, that wraps us up for today. Giles Potter, Great Outcomes, coming to us from New Zealand. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, AI, QA, and the context.
Next Level BizTech has been a production of Telarus Studio 19. Please visit Telarus.com for more information.